This is one of my favorite places to be. It is so nice to just sit here and watch and listen. There's nobody out here. It's about 30 minutes from our house. There's a beautiful lake and this amazing old growth forest. I came out here to just sit and observe and take in everything that this place has to teach me. And I'm trying to just let whatever comes my way absorb into me. Because often if you try to go into something with specific ideas in your head, then you get closed off to things that are right in front of you and all around you. So everything that I can learn during my quality time spent here in a natural forest is going to be extremely helpful to me as I continue developing a food forest ecosystem in our own backyard. But while this passive approach to learning out here is very helpful and I do enjoy it, there's an entirely human concept that I'd like to talk about today that gets applied to every type of forest system on the planet, and that is the concept of layers. So the forest has absolutely no knowledge of this concept of layers. It's a completely human idea. In fact, let's just ask the locals. Excuse me. Yes, can you tell me which layer you're in? Hello? Maybe it's too far away to hear me. Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, but can you please tell me which layer of the forest this is where you live here? Which layer? L-A-Y-E-R? I don't think they understand me. They're probably all laughing at me, as they should be. Okay, so obviously the forest has no use for this silly concept. Every living thing here has gotten along just fine for millions of years without it before we came along and started trying to make sense of it all. But humans love organization, get a real kick out of it, and we are quick to find patterns in seemingly chaotic systems. So learning about layers and utilizing them can be really helpful when you are building a new food forest. When you first glance at this, you may think that it looks messy and wild and beautiful all at the same time. But then if you look more closely, of course, you can see the canopy layer way at the top, providing shade and wind protection, food and habitat for wildlife, and creating this whole microclimate underneath here. And then under that, there's the subcanopy, providing many of those same benefits just on a much smaller scale. Then the bush and shrub layer, which produces a substantial portion of the food with berries and nuts and seeds. The herbaceous layer, attracting and feeding pollinators and adding more organic matter to the soil. The ground cover, protecting the soil and its microbiology, trapping moisture, adding lots of fertility to the soil. And the climbing vine layer, taking advantage of the vertical support provided by the upper layers. So that's 6 layers, and a typical food forest will also include a 7th layer for growing root crops like asparagus and garlic and sunchokes. So now we can use this as our guide and just replace many of these species with ones that will produce food for us as well as the local wildlife. Now, nitrogen fixation is also essential, especially during the early stages of a food forest. Thankfully, there are nitrogen fixing species that can exist in almost every single layer. The overall goal with these layers is to maximize biodiversity. A forest can sustain itself for many thousands or even millions of years simply because of the sheer number of species that live there. Plants, animals, insects, fungi, microbiology in the soil, everything plays a part in maintaining that balanced ecosystem through a perpetual nutrient, mineral, and water cycle. So if we want our food forest to be self-sustaining someday, then we are going to have to increase biodiversity significantly. And that may be rather difficult to accomplish considering this small growing space we have here. I would guess this is probably about 1,200 square feet altogether here, which according to my calculations, that's about 1/36 of an acre. So yeah, it's very small. We can't even do anything with the back portion of the yard just yet because of a sewer project happening next year. But we are definitely up for the challenge, considering the end result would be a low-cost, low-maintenance food production system right here in our own backyard. I mean, come on, that would be amazing. Correction, it will be amazing. You have to speak it out loud with confidence. It will be amazing. Since we are limited on space back here, we could just completely ignore the canopy layer from our plans for this food forest system. We would have nothing else back here anywhere near as tall as this silver maple next to me. This tree's already 50 years old, and I don't know how much longer it's going to be here considering all of the holes in the branches from birds making nests. So if that tree is gone in a few years, then we'll just have to think of the subcanopy as our tallest layer. And that is perfectly fine to do that in a small space like this. But at least we do still have the benefits from all of the other neighborhood trees. Even if they're not on our property and they're not producing food for us, they will still be providing all of the other benefits of a canopy layer. As far as everything else goes, we are still a long way from being able to officially call this a food forest. In fact, we are missing entire layers from this system. Our subcanopy at the moment consists of just these 2 dwarf peach trees. The bush and shrub layer is virtually non-existent unless you want to count the blueberries way over there and the raspberries way over here. The herbaceous layer is by far the most populated in this system right now, even though it's looking a bit run down from all the dry weather toward the end of the summer here. But this stuff has been doing exactly what it needs to do. The pollinators have been coming out in droves for this stuff. The ground cover is mostly just wild violets coming up everywhere, and that's fine. We can eat the leaves on those. But I'm also trying to let the white clover come up through the mulch wherever it can so that I can add some more nitrogen. The root layer just has this one lonely occupant right now, these Egyptian walking onions, but those will spread out quite a lot and make a whole big family for themselves there. And the vine layer obviously has nothing substantial to climb right now. Since we will be growing more dwarf varieties and smaller trees back here, we probably won't want to let any of the vines climb up those trees because they could get too heavy and weigh the trees down. So I'm going to have to build some trellises for the vines. So that's really all we have for right now, and I'm not going to bore you with this whole long list of what we'd like to grow and what we're thinking about, and I mean, that could take forever. Besides, I think it's much more interesting to just show you what we're doing when we're doing it. So in the meantime, I've got a great deal of planning and research and budgeting for this, just to get this to a complete food forest system someday. But at least I will have the layers to guide me on my quest. No, that's no good. The layers will comfort me. No. Well, here's like a delicious chocolate cake, chocolate mousse, buttercream frosting, and cherries. Oh man, that sounds awesome.